Celebrated filmmaker James Mangold is no stranger when it comes to the world of comic movie adaptations, with the newly appointed co-heads of DC Studios, James Gunn and Peter Safran, unveiling the first part of their plan to reboot the entire DC universe. Mangold has been hired to write as well as direct a Swamp Thing flick. Now that it's official that he's working on a film based on DC's existential Guardian of the Green, or in other words, Swamp Thing, fans couldn't be any happier. But today's video isn't about the fearsome Swamp Thing. Rather, we're going to be talking about Floronic Man, one who is imbued with the same powers as that of Swamp Thing, and categorically speaking, happens to be one of the most horrifying villains that Swamp Thing has ever had a run-in with. So, in today's video, we'll be doing an in-depth analysis of this DC supervillain, who happens to be a creation of Gardner Fox and Gil Kane. So, are you ready for this? Then let's get rolling. Actually, before we get into our explanation, we do have one very small request. If you enjoy our content, then please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is just one small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thanks. Now, let's begin. How a scientist became Plant Master, the Floronic Man. For a better understanding of this, we will explore a couple of comic issues while focusing primarily on the events revolving around the Plant Master. We will begin with Master of the Plant World, a storyline that marked his first appearance as an enemy of the Atom. After a baffling bank robbery comprising an even more mysterious plantoid seed catches the attention of Jean Loring, she decides to start her own private investigation. This naturally has Ray Palmer probing deeper into the matter as the Atom, and following Jean, as the latter, after her visit with the horticultural expert, decides to wait out in a greenhouse and keep vigil. Suddenly, the orchid right next to Jean sneakily turns towards her and releases some kind of a gas, one that eventually causes her to fall asleep. Adam, who has been observing everything, finds tiny floral spirits, and in this case, two mythical dryads, emerging out of the flowers and then flying away with flower stalks. Determined to establish a connection with Jean's case, Adam follows the dryads to an old house situated miles away from Ivytown. There, he finds a scientist who calls himself Plant Master and discovers his plans to use advanced knowledge of botany to take over the world with his mutated plants. Of course, Adam attempts to stop the master of all growing things, but ends up getting caught in the jaws of a Venus flytrap. Convinced that the mighty Adam will no longer stand in the way of the Plant Master's plant conquest of Earth, he leaves from there with the Dryads to initiate his plans of conquest. As for the tiny Titan, he manages to break free by altering his size and discovers Maya, the queen of the flower spirits, held inside a cage. When Adam frees her, he learns more about the Plant Master, whose real name happens to be Jason Woodrue, and that he is a human-like exile from an interdimensional world inhabited by wood nymphs, dryads, nereids, and other flower spirits. Woodrue is banished from there for his wicked deeds to Earth Dimension, believing that he would ultimately perish there. However, that wasn't the case. He retained every bit of knowledge, using which he captured Maya and compelled her obedience. The goal was simple. Woodrue wanted Maya to help him conquer Earth. Via Maya, he could lay his hands on real flowers that he would need to protect his plantoid seeds. It doesn't take Adam long to figure out that the police arrested the wrong guy for the Ivy bank robbery, and that Woodrue was the real man behind everything. Soon, P-Day arrives. Adam and Maya are seen arriving in Washington, D.C., where they find Woodrue making his plants attack anything and everything. So, we see flowers transformed into an anti-aircraft plantoid firing deadly seedlings up in the sky, tanks turning into grim tumbleweed plantoids, and the entire place infused with a sleeping gas. Maya is only temporarily able to gain her control back over the flower spirits before Woodrue puts her into a deadly slumber. As for Adam, he poses a bit of a struggle with a gripper plantoid that almost drowns him, but he is able to grab Woodrue's control box, take command of his plantoids, and put them all out of commission, thereby defeating him, and later having him sentenced to prison on the charges of bank robbery. Next, we will be exploring two short stories together that will feature Jason Woodrue's transformation into the plant-human hybrid, also known as the Floronic Man. The storyline, titled Perilous Plan of the Plant Master, begins with the Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, traveling across the skies of the northwestern California along with his alien companion, Itty, a starfish-like creature, when he gets ambushed by two giant trees clobbering each other. With Jordan attempting to replant the trees, he gets attacked by them once again, but this time, the trees start shooting at him with their leaves, to the point that they almost blind him. Later, with vines choking Jordan further, the Emerald Crusader eventually realizes that he's under some strange attack by the Plant Kingdom. Now, while this is happening, Itty decides to investigate the forest on his own, and chances upon an unnatural crack below, later revealed to be a hidden underground chamber of Jason Woodrue, the Plant Master. Itty senses the presence of evil within Woodrue, and realizes who the perpetrator is behind the attack. Itty also witnesses Woodrue's astonishing transformation into Floronic Man, after the latter gulps down an elixir he had created in order to possess the ultimate plant power. Woodrue goes through an inhuman transformation, where every bit of his skin, hair, and bones gets replaced by flora and fauna. This horrifying vision prompts Eddie to go back to Jordan and warn him. The storyline ends with Floronic Man choosing Jordan as a test victim and trying out his powers, which is basically creating a whirlwind of seeds and hitting Jordan with it, only to have Jordan make a clean sweep by vacuuming up the seeds and blowing them back where they can be put to better use. The second storyline, titled Fury of the Floronic Man, begins with Floronic Man thinking of all the ways that he can destroy Green Lantern. He commands giant trees to attack Jordan, but the Green Gladiator is quick enough to defend himself. This only infuriates the Floronic Man even further, who now sprouts a cactus for the meddling superhero and stings him with a cactus needle. The sting causes Jordan temporary insanity, and he ends up crash landing against an exceedingly ungiving bark that leads him to lose his senses. This has Floronic Man capturing him with tree sap and removing his power ring before Jordan regains his consciousness. When the captured Green Lantern wakes up, Floronic Man elucidates his plans of transforming the entire world into a global Garden of Eden, devoid of any humans, and also states that he wishes to rule the world as its king. While Floronic Man is busy taunting Jordan, Eddie manages to take the ring and free Jordan. Once Jordan gets free, he puts on his ring and easily defeats Floronic Man. Jordan then turns the moisture surrounding Floronic Man into ice, which results in the villain getting transformed into ice in the process and going into hibernation. Character evolution of Floronic Man. The Dissection. After General Sunderland arranged Jason Woodrew's release from jail, he hired the scientists to study the remains of the gray, brittle, tattooed Bifrost Swamp Thing, and thereby determine how scientist Alec Holland had transformed himself into a swamp creature. Of course, Woodrew hated Sunderland and addressed him as the Old Reptile. He loathed every encounter that he had with Sunderland, but ended up conceding to the latter's never-ending demands for the sole fact that he didn't want to go back to prison. With Woodrew investing days in order to learn something reproductive about the legendary Swamp Thing, he ended up performing an elementary autopsy, which led to him discover that the body of Swamp Thing contained vegetable versions of basic human organs. Here, we'd like to stress on a heart, kidney, liver, as well as a brain for that matter. But having said that, none of the organs were capable of functioning due to the deficit of any real biological component in there. Woodrew eventually attempted to explain to Sunderland that when Holland's body, which after the blast was completely soaked with biorestorative formula and came in contact with nearby swamp, the saturated chemicals in Holland's body ended up reacting with the microorganisms of the swampland, thereby generating a completely separate organism. No points for guessing that it wasn't Alec Holland anymore, but a mutated version of him. The intelligent mass of plant life absorbed the very knowledge, memories, and personality of Holland, and went to the whole extent of attempting its very best to be Alec Holland, and whatever remained in the Cairo chest was basically the closest that the plant life could lay its hands on. This meant that the Swamp Thing wasn't dead, and while Woodrew tried his best to warn Sunderland, the latter simply refused to pay any attention to his discovery and announces Woodrew's employment termination, much to his shock. This should not come as any surprise when we tell you that a disgusted Woodrew ended up tampering with Sunderland's computer to make some major changes throughout the whole building. In short, Woodrew made sure of waking up Swamp Thing from his Cairo chest, and this could only mean one thing: the inevitable death of the Old Reptile. Obsession with the Swamp Thing. Now, it goes without saying that Woodrew grew immensely fascinated with the Swamp Thing and made up his mind to follow him and in the process be able to learn more. Woodrew, in due course, discovers the body of the Swamp Thing and finds him rooted in the swamp. So much so that he even had stuff growing on him, and he pretty much seemed unresponsive. Woodrew, on the other hand, continued performing experiments in the hopes of contacting the Green, or in other words, the elemental forces connected to all forms of plant life in the universe. Now, when we say experiments, we'd like to stress on Woodrew's growing so fanatical and impatient that he ended up consuming parts of Swamp Thing, the tubers that had grown from the body. It's fair to say that this has Woodrew finally tapped into the cosmic energy force which animated all plant life, and the Green strips him of every last bit of his humanity, making Woodrew embrace his new identity as the Floronic Man. What follows next is Floronic Man going on a complete rampage to wipe out every existing non-plant life on Earth. He held mankind responsible for destroying the planet and was hell-bent on eradicating every human life. Wondering what is the scariest part? Well, Floronic Man was actually capable of doing things his way. We are glad that he came face to face with a revived Swamp Thing, who makes him come to a realization that Floronic Man is a man at the end of the day, no matter how much he chose not to believe that. Swamp Thing also added that every bit of violence and destruction caused by him so far was an act of a man that would never do something that the Green would do. When it comes to plants, they cannot survive without animals, and this has the Green abandoning the Floronic Man, who, it goes without saying, goes even more insane, as he now tries to cover himself up with more artificial skin in order to attempt his human side. At the end, he is finally taken into custody by members of the Justice League. "Look what you made me do." Floronic Man was later seen enlisting the aid of his henchwoman, Eva and Holly Green, to break Poison Ivy out of Arkham Asylum and bring her to him. Of course, Ivy was repelled to see the Floronic Man, who now addressed himself as Floro, and further looked more disgusted to find his current appearance, a head on a plant body. With Ivy asking Floro why he broke her out of prison, the latter tells her a story of how he attempted to stop Swamp Thing from committing an atrocity, only to end up getting decapitated himself. The severed head was taken to Star Labs, where he was fed with nutrients and sunshine, and left under the care of a young technician who smoked an awful lot of grass. In short, Floro ended up regrowing himself under the very influence of dope. Technically, that was the first thing that he came in contact with, and now he wished to form a drug empire made of marijuana, and in so doing, flood the entire streets of Gotham City with his weed. Floro ends up offering Ivy $10 million in exchange for 3 blood sample vials, each taken at a 6-hour interval, in the hopes of cloning the entire new life form, a true fusion of flesh and plant. But Ivy eventually comes to a decision that she doesn't want Floro to run the world, and instead helps Batman to engage in a brawl with Floro. The fight eventually leads to Floro placing himself in a puddle of water, which prompts Batman to take advantage of the situation and electrify the villain, after which he decapitates in the hopes that he can regrow a better frame of mind. Floronic Man as the Cedar. Now, if we take a look at the New 52, Jason Woodrow is introduced to us once again. At present, he is known as the Cedar Man, and he soon finds his way to the Parliament of Trees. To those of you who are wondering, what exactly is the Parliament of Trees? Well, it happens to be a group of plant elementals that have existed way before the humans, and it's fair to state them as the very protectors of plant life. Coming back to the Cedar, once he makes his way to the Parliament of Trees, he literally begs them to give him the powerful position of the Avatar. Of course, the Parliament of Trees refuses to endow him with such powers, but believing that he might be of some use, the plant elementals command him to save Alec Holland. Cedar, in return, asks for some of their powers, and he is granted some. Now, speaking of the Swamp Thing, he has been hunting the Cedar for the sole purpose of him disrupting the very balance of the green. So when the Cedar comes face to face with the Swamp Thing, the Parliament of Trees settles on a fight between the duo for the title of the champion of the Greens. While it is true that the Cedar ends up winning the battle against the Swamp Thing and briefly becoming the champion of the Green, the latter ends up tricking the Cedar from within the Green and takes back the title, going to the extent of almost killing the Cedar in the process. At the end, the Swamp Thing is left with no choice but to place Cedar deep within the Green so as to save his life. How did he become the champion of flowers? After the Parliament of Trees was destroyed by the Goddess of Magic, a new parliament known as the Parliament of Flowers emerged in its place. This new parliament ended up choosing a suicidal scientist, somebody by the name of Oleander Sorrel, as their champion. Of course, this had Jason Woodrow make an attempt in order to influence the new champion and not only remove Sorrel from the scenario, but also take the very powers of the Parliament of Flowers as his own. Aware of the fact that Swamp Thing would try his best to aid Sorrel and help him figure out his position, Woodrow approached Sorrel as a friend and to help him out. Just a few months left before Sorrel's transformation into the new champion, his son passed away, and this naturally caused a crack in the relationship with his wife. Upon making up his mind that he didn't want his wife to be alone, he ended up producing offspring out of his plant matter. While Sorrel's wife was more than happy to accept them and also care for them, the children withered away. We can blame Sorrel's suicidal nature here. This left his wife even more distressed than before, and this is precisely when Woodrow took advantage of the whole situation and persuaded Sorrel to sleep and leave behind all of his anxieties for the future. So while Sorrel paid heed to his friend's advice, Woodrow ended up cannibalizing Sorrel's body and successfully co-opted the very power of the Parliament for himself. Marvelous appearances of Floronic Man in other media. We will begin with the 1997 superhero movie Batman and Robin, where the character of Woodrow makes an appearance and is portrayed by John Glover. Here, he is seen as a mad scientist experimenting on Bane, and also turning his very assistant, Pamela Isley, into Poison Ivy while attempting to kill her. Woodrow also appeared as the main villain in the 2017 animated superhero flick titled Batman and Harley Quinn, where he is voiced by popular actor Kevin Michael Richardson. Voiced by Ted Knight, Woodrow also made an appearance in the Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure as the character Strahl in the episode The Plant Master, where he has discovered a new way to impact the plant growth using wave patterns. In Gary Dauberman's 2019 superhero horror TV series Swamp Thing, Woodrow makes an appearance and is portrayed by Canadian actor Kevin Durand. Floronic Man possessed unique powers. Let's find out what those are. Floronic Man transformed himself into the new avatar of the Green after he consumed the body of Oleander Sorrel. This, in the process, made him the most powerful wielder of the Green, and his connection with the Green made him communicate with all plant forms. Next comes the power of chlorokinesis, which means that Floronic Man is not only capable of manipulating, but also animating any plant for that matter to obey him and do his bidding. He was also capable of creating semi-sentient creatures out of those plants, make them think independently, and follow his command, both at the same time. You may be surprised to know that there was a time when he actually created 2 dogs out of plant matter. Besides all of these powers, he also possesses elemental control, toxikinesis, which has him specializing in seeds that eject venomous tentacles, the power of magic, teleportation, and last but not least, let's not disregard that he can also be quite intimidating. Marvelous verdict. It goes without saying that the character of Jason Woodrue has evolved a lot over the years, and every version of this character has been intriguing in his own way. He can be scary and downright insane at the same time. And if we take a look under his artificial skin, which is nothing but a way to conceal his darker self, the result can be quite disturbing. Anyway, with this, we finally come to the end of today's video. This was the origin story of the Floronic Man. What do you guys think of this character, and which version did you fancy the most? Let us know in the comment section below, and stay tuned with us as we promise to come back with more exciting content. Until then, have a good one, and be safe.